summer conference. Our theme this year is separating beekeeping myths, beliefs, and reality. My name is Frank Gibbons, and I'll be the moderator for this afternoon. I'm a retired horticulture professor from Cal Poly University in Northern California. I started keeping bees, believe it or not, in 1970. Now that doesn't mean I've been keeping them all the time. I was kind of self-taught. I had a couple of hives and didn't really know what I was doing. Ended up giving them to the horticulture department at Kansas State University. And having been back to bees for 40-some years, and then when I came to New Mexico, I decided it was time to get back into beekeeping, so I got a couple of hives. And so this time around, I wanted to know how to do it, so I was lucky enough to get in the Certified Beekeepers Program. And I'm in my second year finishing up. I see a lot of my colleagues out here that are in the program, and the new program as well. In the first year, second year, first year students are here as well. So I currently have 2 top bar hives and 1 honey straw in my backhouse, and they're doing well. So maybe the class helped a little bit. Not a lot, I was kidding. I believe our conference planning committee put together a great program today with outstanding presenters, and you'll see. I've met most of them already, and they're going to be great. Before I introduce our first speaker, though, I would like to call on our association president to issue his welcome and offer a few remarks. But before he comes forward, let me tell you a little bit about what I know about Craig. Craig has been keeping bees since 2003 and is now the owner-operator of Papa Bear's Gange. He is also a distributor of Texas bees from California, and many of us have purchased bees from him. In fact, this past spring, Craig brought in about 680 or 700 packages, which he sold in Arizona as well as New Mexico. Now, we're going to talk about that issue of bringing bees in later. But just let me say this. I appreciate, I know all the people who bought these, Craig appreciates the fact that he's filled that void, which allowed us a place where we can buy bees locally, even though they're not local bees. It's a great practice delivery. So I appreciate that endeavor, and then we'll talk about growing our own later. Or actually today we're going to Craig has been very active in association activities over the years. He's given numerous presentations, has been an instructor in the association program, has served on the board, was vice president from 2013 to 2015, and this year has become president. In addition to all this, he's a family man with a wife, 3 sons, 2 daughters, and I think we figured out 4 7/8 grandkids. We'll explain that later. He also enjoys scouting, backpacking, and geocaching. And he works full-time as an APR, which is National Guard Reserve in New Mexico International Guard. And I can vouch for how important this job is, because I have spent 30-some years in the Army Reserves, and without people like Craig, we wouldn't have the defense structure we have now in this country. So thank you, Craig, for your service.
Appreciate it. So, 13 months and 12 days left before I retire. Military life, so very excited. It'll be 35 years by the time I retire. So, but very, very thankful and honored to be here and be the president. Very thankful for all the effort that has gone in to helping put this together, to invite our guest speakers here, to arrange and coordinate. There's so much that goes on behind here. Kathy, I know was the lead on as far as organizing this event. If you can come on up. One of the folks has worked with her as well to help do this, so she didn't have to carry the whole brunt of it. If you want to, because I don't know all of everyone that did, so I figured I'd bring her up and have her.
I had great people volunteers. Without whom this wouldn't happen. Well, level 1.
I'm standing next to her, right? So she can hear.
Oh, does it work that way? This is for Linda's hearing aid, so it's not a microphone. We'll have the mic protected. Our little ones were Larry Barrett, Lydia Clark,
Stand up, stand up.
And
everybody was standing.
Please, be recognized.
Lynette Ewer and Manuel Ruiz. He's there. Stay standing. Even Todd and Pat Barrett from Frank. Owen is not level 2, but she did all of the technical stuff along with Jeremy, who's in charge of physical plants here, our treasurer on the board, and his local fleet, and Randy Schwartz, helped set up here today. There's Randy. Let's see, who else? That's enough.
A lot of people to help make this happen.
Mark and Beth.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, of course, they did everything. All right, that's a lot, so I didn't have to do that. Okay.
Too great. Thank you. My schedule and stuff, there's no way I could have done this without their help. So I very, very much appreciate their help and what they do. And the times we've been able to meet as a board and everything that's going on. Thank you so much. Enjoy. I think we have a great.
Whoever donated the Toyota, the Swiss Army knife to the association, we appreciate it. But if you want your keys back, we got somebody, somebody's going.
Greatly appreciate our speakers. Looking forward to hearing them. We got to spend some time. Well, I'm getting marked as far as my time. Just tell me to shut up. But looking forward to the program. Yeah.
thank you, Greg. Now, for a few more announcements, as you can see from our agenda, everybody has an agenda.
What?
I guess everybody has an agenda. In fact, why don't you say it now? Lulu has an announcement.
This has to do with the certification class. We've heard from a lot of people who helped with this program and the program keeps growing. There will be 2 paying jobs available for next year. First year certification facilitator and the second year facilitator. And we will post it on the NMBKA website as well as the ABQB website. And Carolyn Hammock facilitated, I think, for 3 years, the first year, and she is retiring. So if you do want to talk to her about what it involved, she said she would welcome your questions and conversation. So just keep an eye on that. We don't have I don't have all the details because I was not a facilitator, but just think about it if you're an experienced facilitator.
As long as before I forget, TJ has brought some of his famous high tools. He has a few of them in the car. They're going fast. So, one, please see TJ. Raise your hand. Everybody knows TJ. Now I'll put this one up here. Cuts. Melissa, can you hear all right if we just leave this? Yes?
Yeah.
It's better up here. Okay, as you can see from our agenda, as I started to say before, we're going to start off this afternoon with 2 presentations. We'll have a half-hour break at 2:30 and then resume the panel discussion later. We will wrap up, should wrap up around 4:30. Meet and greet, Kathy's words here, I guess, in this room. Yeah. Okay. I would ask that, pay attention, enjoy the sessions, and I'm going to, and Kathy and I talked about this, and Kathy and I decided to do it. Well, I'm going to ask you to please hold your your questions, your big questions until later on when we have the Q&A. If you have a burning question that you just have to have answered right away about the presentation, then if it's okay with the speakers, then go ahead and ask. But I know as a speaker myself, sometimes I get sidetracked and then somebody else asks a question about that question, and we're going to try to stay on track with it. And so if you can keep the big questions, what is life? Those kind of questions. Until later, then we'll all have a chance to maybe talk about those. Restrooms are back there somewhere, Craig. Run the halls. Go back there. We don't have a microphone, so I'll have to ask the speakers to speak out. Hopefully, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. And I'm getting the sign here too that I'm running out of time. Let's see. I think that's about all I have to say. Any questions about how we're going to run things this afternoon? Okay, if you don't like the way it's being run, then I'll give you my time and you come. Okay, our first speaker this afternoon is John Gange. Did I say it right, John?
Frank, you butchered that. Remember, I said Gange like lasagna.
Gange.
You did fine. Gange. Thank you.
John started keeping bees in 1984 when he partnered with the Business Association in Virginia, running a commercial beekeeping company. The genesis was honey production. They specialized in sourwood honey. I looked at sourwood actually is Oxydendron arboretum, and it's in the heath family. I hope this is right. And the honey, as I understand, I've never had it, it has kind of a caramel, buttery texture and flavor, and kind of an aftertaste of maybe ginger snaps or a little bit of an edge to it. So it sounds wonderful. I've never had it, but we can't, as far as I know, we can't grow sourwood. So don't try to become a sourwood honey producer unless you go to Virginia, right? Kentucky or someplace.
Yeah, it is really localized.
Yeah. Okay, tell us about that later, John. John moved to Santa Fe in 1991, founded San Juan Apiaries, and where he focuses on honey production and nucleus colony management. His day job is the sales and marketing of pre-engineered steel building systems. But as you can imagine, in the spring and summer and fall, he's pretty busy with his beekeeping. So John will be speaking on the establishment and management of nucleus colonies for the sustainable beekeeping.
Wow. You know, I'm from Santa Fe, up the road, a little town called Santa Fe. When we have beekeeping meetings, we're lucky to get 10 or 15 people. We're lucky. So when Kathy asked me to speak at the New Mexico Beekeeping Association meeting, I guess I really wasn't thinking, wow, this is slightly intimidating. but thanks for having me here today, and it's a pleasure to be here to chat with you a little bit. And you know, there's an old saying, in places like this, we have so many beekeepers. You ask 5 different people, beekeepers, the same question, you're going to get 20 different answers. And I think that holds true, really, about facets of beekeeping and management, how you keep your bees, how you manage your bees, why you want to keep bees. And it varies, it's different. So my style of beekeeping and how I manage nucleus colonies and production colonies could very well be different than how Craig manages his hives or TJ manages his hives. And so anyway, keep that in mind. I think having an open mind about different styles of management and equipment setups, I think we're all looking towards the same goal. We want to keep healthy bees in a healthy environment. And somewhere along the line, if we make a little honey, I think that's a great thing to have a little surplus honey to sell. We're going to talk a little bit about sustainable apiary geared towards nucleus colony management. Nucleus meaning a starter colony, a small colony, and I'll explain a little bit about this particular equipment setup. But let's talk a little bit about sustainability. It means you're able to maintain a certain level of production, no matter what it applies to. If it's sustainable, it's maintaining itself at a certain level. I don't have to go elsewhere to get other resources to maintain my certain level of sustainability. And I think today in beekeeping, I think that's very, very important. There's a lot of outside influences that affect how you keep and manage your bees, the environment, the weather, imported bees. We have varroa, we have different viruses and pathogens that affect how you do that. So sustainability allows you to kind of control all of those factors and how it affects your style of beekeeping and how you want to manage your bees. So let's talk a little bit about the equipment that I'm using for nucleus colonies. I'm assuming most people, I don't want to get into the debate of different styles of equipment or whatever, but the focus for our operation is standard Langstroth equipment. And I need you to help me out today. I was in the honey house extracting honey yesterday. I looked around and I said, oh great, I don't have a divided deep brood box. So this is a medium, as most of you know, 6 5/8 super, but today we're going to call it a deep brood box. Everybody follow me? So what we've done is we've taken a standard deep hive body and we've divided it down the middle with an 1.5 inch divider. You can buy these or you can make them yourself. It's really not that difficult. The division allows for us to have 2 colonies in the same brood box. We have an entrance on one end. We have an entrance on the other end. Similar to a standard deep brood box, if you were to use a single 10-frame hive, we have inner covers. So I made these up myself. Equipment gets more expensive every year, so if I can make a few things in the shop, I do it. So these are just standard ventilated inner covers that we place on each individual loop. Everybody follow me so far? Once these nucleus colonies get to a point where they're getting a little crowded, you can add another 10-frame deep. Excuse me, 4-frame deep. The reason that we are using 4-frame nucleus as opposed to 5-frame nucleus is because we've divided this deep brood box and it allows for 4 frames on each side. And everything works very, very nicely from an equipment management standpoint. When I say easily managed, I mean the equipment is smaller, the setups are smaller, easier to maintain the equipment, and really it's not, people get into beekeeping, I think, and they get a package of bees, or they catch a swarm and they put it in a hive body and everything is fine until the honey flow hits and the bees expand, and all of a sudden you're having to add another hive body, another deep or another medium frame, and things at times can be a little intimidating. And I think nucleus colony management, I think everyone should try it. It's wonderful to have a few nukes around for various reasons. They're a wonderful resource, but they're not as intimidating to work as a standard 10-frame hive body with a couple of supers. Item number 2, future production colonies. In our operation, once we establish the nucleus colonies, and we're going to talk about how we make our splits, how we introduce queens. But once these are established, and I have 2 colonies in one box, I have a wonderful resource here. Once I get these set up and established, the main reason that we do nucleus colonies is to overwinter them in this particular setup. And we want to overwinter them because they become the resource for the spring of 2019's crop and for bees. I'm going to make the assumption that people lose colonies here. We lose colonies in our apiary. So with having the availability of nucleus colonies in your apiary allows you to replace colonies that don't survive the winter. That's one very, very good reason to maintain nucleus colonies. It also allows you to have resources of brood, frames of pollen, honey, and available queens. So typically we overwinter 50 or 60 nucleus colonies in setups just like this. In addition to a nucleus colonies, we overwinter probably 80 to 90 production colonies. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with a 10-frame setup and a standard high body where I have a deep and I have a medium and up where we keep bees, generally a second medium super full of honey to overwinter the colonies. When I say item number 5, it can be overwintered easy if healthy. And I think that's extremely important to maintain healthy colonies. Young queens, young productive queens, good nutrition, and low mite counts. So I think that should be on everyone's objective. To keep our bees healthy, we need to manage for honey to make sure they have adequate stores. And then we need to also monitor and manage for mites to keep our bees healthy. I think that's everyone's responsibility as a beekeeper, and I think you should try to develop some type of management to manage your colonies to keep them healthy. When we make splits in the spring, we sell a lot of nucs. And most of the time we'll make a 5-frame nuc. This is a 5-frame box as opposed to a 4-frame. Basically, it's the same setup. So if someone wants to purchase nucs, we make up 5-frame nucs in a 5-frame box, and we get our resources from our overwintered nucleus colonies. So we don't go in and touch our production colonies because we want those bees to make a honey product. So 5, 6, 7 years ago when I started working with nucleus colonies, because I read a lot about it, so I wanted to try that for our system to try to get me at a level of sustainability so I did not have to go anywhere else to find resources for my bees. So once I started doing that, I almost immediately, my thought process was, I want these nucs to build up as strong as I can so I can turn them into a production colony. And that's a viable process if you want to do that. The way we manage our colonies now is, I know I can maintain a certain number of nucleus colonies, and I have bee yards that will sustain a certain number of production colonies. So my focus back then was to build up my colonies to a point where, geez, I don't really need any more production colonies, but it sure is handy to have all these nucleus colonies. Because when one of these production colonies is weak, or it needs brood, or it needs honey, or it needs a queen, I don't have to call up a breeder in California to say, would you ship me a couple of queens because I've got some production colonies that are queenless. So I have that resource, which is a reason in itself to have nucs, I think, within your sustainability. The other way, as I mentioned, when we make up these nucs in the spring, we don't touch the production colonies. I don't want to go in at the end of April and May, a week or two before the honey flow, and start robbing brood from my production colonies, because it's going to weaken them and they're not going to make as much honey as they ordinarily would, because I'm robbing them to create nucleus colonies. So these guys are my money in the bank, or bees in the bank, because I have bees to make splits. Matter of fact, once you get into a process where you're overwintering nucleus colonies, these bees tend to really explode in the spring. So you're going to have a lot of available brood to make nucleus colonies. I'm not a queen breeder, so I don't raise my own queens. But we do import queens from different queen breeders. This year I was involved in, well, last year I applied for a research grant with Western SARE, Sustainable Agricultural Research. And this March I was awarded funds to work with this particular grant. So we established 2 nuke yards, specific nuke yards. We have 20 nucleus colonies in 1 yard, and then 5 miles away we have 20 nucleus colonies. And I'll show you some slides and pictures. We have 2 different types of queens. We have Russian queens in either yard, 50-50. We have BSH, roller-sensitive hygienic queens, that are special queens developed by the USDA in Baton Rouge. Dr. Villa can speak to you in detail about that. And Russian queens that are open-mated, carniolan queens from honeybee genetics in California. So being involved with that has really made me focus on more so on the nucleus colony production. And I don't think you can underestimate the importance of good genetics within your bee yard. So in addition to that, we will import queens from different queen breeders that I've worked with over the years. So once we make the splits from these overwintered nucs, and I'm making up a 5-frame split now, so if these are someone that's going to buy these 3 or 4 weeks down the road, I'll introduce 2.5 frames of brood, a frame of pollen and honey, and either an empty frame of foundation or a foundation that's partially dry. And these quickly expand. In doing so, we introduce queens. And you can do that under a push-in cage or just introduce the cage itself. I'm going to also have a couple of pictures that we can actually see how we make these splits and divides from these nucleus colonies. Another valuable resource to have nucs like this available, number 8, I sell them. You can establish nucs in your yard and say, geez, I've got 5 or 6 nucs. I don't really need all these bees this year, but so-and-so down the road is looking for bees, so I can sell the nucleus colonies. Number 9, strong nucs make surplus honey. And I brought a couple of photos along today as part of the presentation, where I can actually show you that once these nucleus colonies build up to a certain point, you can actually super these to make honey. And I've had to do so because I've had so much activity in the bee yards. When I get out there, the nucs have exploded and they're basically boiling over with bees. So I cut a 10-frame metal queen excluder in half, and put it on top of the nucs, and gave them a box of comb to make a box of honey, which they eagerly did. So you've got the option of actually managing your nucs for honey production. So next year I thought, well, geez, this is doable. So I'm going to try a couple of bee yards. I'm going to put 10 or 15 nucs in there. I'm not going to change them over into 10-frame deeps. I don't care if they're a production colony. They're going to be a production nuc. And it's really important, I think, not to underestimate the simplicity of having nucleus colonies like this in your operation, because you don't have to spend 2 or 3 hours tearing into a 2 or 3 box production colony, trying to look for a queen, trying to cut out swarm cells. This is a much easier way of managing small colonies of bees. Item number 10, nukes are like money or bees in the bank. I have queens that I can utilize in my apiary, in my operation, for whatever resource I need. I can take a queen out of this hive and put it in here with a couple of frames, and now I've got a 5-frame nuke that I can actually sell in a week or so, once they expand. So here's basic nuke production. These are some photos that we took. I think this is from last year. This is Nuke Yard 2018. So there are 20 or 22 nukes in this particular nuke yard. You can see there's a couple of various stages of production. We have some doubles, 4 or 5 doubles there. The rest of them are in a divided deep, and they're in a single 4-frame setup. So again, this is our deep box. We start out, everything looks really great. The bees are expanding, the bees are building up. We give them another box. With either foundation or comb. We use plastic foundation and we coat it a little bit with wax. And what I tend to do is once this 10-frame box, this 4-frame box of beet, once it gets really crowded, I'll take the outside frame and I'll move it up into this box. And I'll give the original 4-frame nuke, I'll give them some foundation or comb, which they'll easily draw out because at this point they're already crowded. Talking in generalities, we make our splits in the spring. So generally all of these hives are on some type of a nectar flow, and they tend to build up very, very rapidly. So once we set up our nucleus colonies, and this happens to be one of our grant yards, so these bees will overwinter in this setup. And as part of this grant, we have stipulated that we are not going to medicate or treat any of these nukes. And we're going to monitor in the spring. So next April, we'll do these 20 colonies and these 20 colonies. This is the second nuke yard. These are mostly all in doubles, and they're looking pretty strong at this point. So we have 10 Russian queens in here and 10 VSH, fluorosensitive hygienic queens. No medications, no treatments, no miticides. And at this point, they appear to be doing very well. We've done mice samples. As part of our research grant, I am extremely fortunate to have Dr. Villa be our technical advisor. So, in addition to that, Dr. Don Hyder from San Juan College in Farmington is a biologist. He's also part of our grant team, and he'll be assisting with testings and setting up a seminar in Farmington for us and that kind of thing. On the left-hand side, we have 2017 nukes. And I wanted to show you how, things get busy in the bee yards, and you go out there to do certain things, and all of a sudden you get out of your truck and you say, oh my goodness, what's going on with these nukes? They're too big. So you can see the white nuke in the middle of the picture is a standard 5-frame nuke that we brought through the winter. And we gave them a second box. And this spring they weren't looking very well, but there was a handful of bees in there. They were light on stores. I'm forever trying to nurture bees to a point where if there's a good queen in there, and I know they did very well last year, and I kind of know the background of the genetics, I want to give them a little boost. So I think I gave them a frame of brood when I went out one visit. The next time I went out, I gave them a frame of brood. Before long, they had filled up the second box. And then I went out a couple weeks later, and it was the first week of May, and the Russian olive and the salt cedar was in full bloom. And they were packed. And I said, oh boy, what do I do now? I don't have time to fool around with them. I don't have that mindset anymore that they have to go in the 10 frame deep box and become a production colony. I love to have the nukes because I can use them, again, for a number of things. So I gave them another box. I didn't have any excluders. It was so easy to make honey that I gave them 4 frames of foundation. And I went back, about 11 days later, they had drawn it all out and filled it up with honey. This is an overwintered nuke from 2017, where, again, in the springtime, when things get rocking and rolling out there and the bees have good resources, good pollen, good nectar, they were so easy. This happens to be Russian queen from last year. The bees couldn't draw that foundation out quick enough, and the queen was laying as soon as they even drew half of the cell out. So that was a beautiful frame of brood. I said, you know, I need to take a picture of this because you have production like that in your bee yards with good solid brood patterns. You've got something good going on. You've got some good genetics. You've got good queens. Here we have a setup of a double nucleus colony. We have a hive on the left and we have a hive on the right. You can't really see this so many bees. There's a masonite inner cover. It's just a flat masonite inner cover. I made those because I can make those 10 times as fast as I can make these, and I'd rather be out in the bee yard than in the wood shop. But these work very well. This is more of a standard inner cover. Those masonite inner covers, they last 3 or 4 years, and they tend to get a little raggedy, but nonetheless, that's a double nuke with a hive on the left and a hive on the right. Any questions? I know I've been doing a lot of talking. Any quick questions? Yeah.
I have 2 questions. So obviously they're able to wither over in just that much space.
They do fabulous.
They do fabulous. And then what about swarms coming out of these?
About what?
Swarms.
Drones?
Swarms. Are you
Oh,
getting?
swarms.
I
Swarms.
mean, are you
Yeah.
finding more, because the space is smaller, are you finding that it's swarming more frequently?
I'm sure I lost a few swarms. Another benefit of having nukes is, if I have 80 production colonies out there, and I know that the Russian olive is going to be blooming in a couple of weeks, and I've already started to go through a bunch of production colonies, and I'm seeing swarm cells everywhere, I'm in big trouble, because I don't have 4 or 5 other beekeepers helping me do this stuff. When I said I don't raise queens, it doesn't mean that I don't make splits, and I don't utilize the bees as a resource. So many years ago when I lived in New Hampshire, I got to know a gentleman in Millbury, Vermont, Charles Mraz. And Charles Mraz ran upwards of 2,000 colonies. Many of you have heard of Mraz. He's unfortunately no longer with us, but Mr. Mraz never bred a queen and never bought a queen. He allowed the bees to make his queen by doing walk-away splits. Everyone know what a walk-away split is?
No.
Walk-away split is, I have a 10 frame box here with a medium super, and I go in and I'm just seeing tons of swarm cells in here, and these bees are gonna go. They're just boiling over with bees. So, I don't really have time and the resources to start going through all of my production colonies to try to look for swarm cells in each box. But if I happen to be doing spring management, and I know these bees, it looks like they're going to swarm because they're raising a lot of swarm cells. If I find the queen, she's gone. I take her. Put her over in my nuke box with a couple frames of brood. And I don't even have to take their brood. Remember, I've got 20 or 30 nukes. I'll go get some brood from the bank of my nukes, a frame of honey. I'll put this queen in there that was gonna swarm next week, and I'll let these bees raise their own queen, walk away split. And we know that bees raise queen cells to swarm. They generally raise 3 types of cells. They'll make a swarm cell at a particular time of year. They'll make a supersedure cell when the existing queen in there is failing, or she's not laying up to expectations, or she's 30 years old. And they'll also do an emergency queen cell. So if I happen to be going through this production colony and I kill the queen accidentally, and it's at a certain time of year, middle of July or August, not really in the swarm season, they're going to raise an emergency cell. They're going to realize that that queen is gone. She's no longer in the colony, and they'll probably realize that within 15 to 20 minutes because of the lack of pheromones within the colony. They'll raise an emergency queen. I really don't like emergency queens because it stresses the colony. They're forced to manufacture a new queen because of my inadvertent mix-up, and I killed the queen. During the springtime, it's different. These bees, their natural tendency is to procreate and to raise queens. When they raise queens for swarms, you can easily go in there and just kind of doing this, a number of years, you know when they're going to start to raise queen cells. You start to see a lot of drones. You start to see the populations explode within the colonies. So I know that if I find her and take her, I'm not going to lose her. They don't have an emergency cell now. They have a beautiful swarm cell that they've raised under optimum conditions. Best food, nutrition. She's going to be a really, in almost every case, she's going to be a wonderful, productive queen for me. So, it doesn't do much to this production colony. I haven't set them back. The only thing I've taken is there a queen? I'm sorry, but she's now over here. They're going to hatch out that queen, and guess what? She's probably only 3 or 4 days away from emerging, and then she's going to mate within 3 or 4 days after that, and then she'll start laying shortly after that. So this whole colony doesn't skip a beat. Follow me?
John.
There's a double nuke set up in a top box just like we have here, and there's 2 beautiful nukes right there. Wall-to-wall bees, a lot of brood within those middle 2 top deeps. If I were to pull that out, I guarantee you there'd be a lot of brood in there. Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. So on your queen, you just move the queen, you cage her?
I'm sorry?
You cage the queen and then move her? Or you move her on a frame of brood and stuff?
Oh, no, just
You just catch her, cage her?
pick up a frame that she's on, stick her in there. Yeah.
Okay. And then the second question that I had, that picture, the prior picture you had, do the bees fight a lot when they're coming out of those holes?
I was hoping someone would ask. I've never seen them fight at all. And we can go back to this picture where it looks like one colony.
Right.
There's a hole in each one of those masonite inner covers, and the bees freely flow around there and communicate. And oh, by the way, I didn't invent double nucleus colonies. This has been going on in beekeeping from long before I was around. Mike Palmer in Vermont has been doing nucleus colonies for many years. Kirk Webster, a number of beekeepers have realized the importance of having the resource of overwintered nukes within your bee yard. So no, they don't fight. I generally expect one at a time. Take the top off and maybe set something over one of the holes and inspect this colony and then do the same thing on the other.
So can they go from one hive to the other?
Yeah,
When it's
I think so. They're not, it's not an aggressive type thing. You give them a puff of smoke and you see bees start to run in the holes of the inner cover.
I've seen pictures where people get 2 8-frame lines, put them together, then put a honey super on top, that straddles both. Have you ever tried that where you put the honey super on without the divider, and so you got both colonies going all that, or do you still keep the divider on the honey super?
I do usually I use an excluder. I like to use queen excluders because I don't want her up there laying in that beautiful frame of honey. She doesn't really need to be up there anyway. So I'll super them individually with an excluder on each side.
You get a lot of robbing?
Do I get a lot of what?
Robbing between the two? Robbing?
Certain times of year they're going to rob. Yeah, right. This time of year we've got a very strong nectar flow. Remember I said nukes make honey? There you go. If we go back to this guy, the tall skyscraper, they wanted to make honey all spring. I would go out and I would pull 4 frames of capped honey in a deep, which is about 35 pounds, about 7 pounds a frame the way they grew it out and capped it. So now I have a nuke that just made as much honey as my production colony with a drawn out comb in a medium super, which is about 32, 33 pounds. So, great resource. Not only did they make it once, they made it 3 times. I would take it, I'd extract it, and most of the time I gave them back this. And there's my most important resource in my bee yard is comb. So you give them back drawn combs on a nectar flow, especially a strong flow, and they'll continuously make a surplus. Yes, ma'am.
So your grant yards, your grant nuke yards.
Yeah.
They're close together and you're not treating it all. Are you concerned about the closeness of the hives with them spreading disease and mites and stuff?
Well,
Because we had, Tom Seeley came in the springtime, you know, he was studying native bees out in the forest.
Yeah.
And how there was a certain amount of space, the most healthy hives were because of the spacing.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, you know, Dr. Seeley, Tom Seeley speaks about this in detail, that this isn't a natural setting. I'm cramming bees.
Right.
You can see how close they are. Not only that, I've got 2 colonies in 1 box. So, yeah, you get drifting, you get robbing, you get a little fighting occasionally, but that's all dependent upon the environment and the time of the year, I guess, so to speak, when you're going in there managing bees like this.
So if you're checking mites in each of these little nukes, and they're that close together, so you'd have to treat them all if you're going to treat them?
No. This setup has nothing to do with the nuke yards, but as you just saw, this is kind of isolating, but I have production colonies in this yard. I didn't have available yards just to isolate these away from all other bees.
Well, it looks like you have lots of space out there. I'm just curious why you didn't draw them out a little bit more, or not.
Can I answer that, John?
What's that for
Can
saying?
I answer that?
Absolutely.
Very simply, if these bees that John is testing cannot cope with that circumstance of extra mites drifting, then in terms of their usefulness for beekeeping, they will not be, in my view, useful enough. We've had yards in research situations with a lot of mite production in susceptible colonies, close to highly resistant colonies, and the resistant colonies can cope with that. So I think we're generating a realistic situation of what to expect.
Thanks. Yeah, of course, Dr. Beer answered that very well. All these hives have mites. I'm not putting undue stresses on the nukes in particular because they happen to be around other colonies that have mites. We realize that. In the perfect world, yeah, it would be wonderful to go in and have a nuke yard here and have 1 or 2 nukes and then a mile down the road split them up like that. Of course, in the natural environment, as Seeley said, bees that live in feral conditions, they're not packing themselves into 1 or 2 square mile area because it's counterproductive to their sustainability, you know, to how they'll actually live. Yeah, absolutely, yes.
I just wanted to ask about the queens. So you said that you buy some queens, but do you mostly just let the bees have the queens and the nukes? When you take a queen out of a nuke to move it to like a production hive, do you buy the queen for the?
I don't like to force my nukes to make queens, although they probably do a very good job. As part of my swarm prevention, when I go through a big production colony in the spring and they're booming,
Yeah.
if I see a queen, she's gone so quick, she's in one of these. Okay, that's how I do it. And I know that I don't have to take time raising my own queens. The bees will do a fabulous job raising their own queens. In fact, they've already started to do it. They've already got 4 or 5 queen cells in there. They'll make beautiful queens. Every now and then I may go through and they'll have 2 or 3 frames of queen cells. So I may take a frame that has a beautiful queen cell on it and do the same thing. But generally, swarm prevention for me is, I don't have time every 10 days to go through these hives to cut out queen cells. So do I lose hives for swarming? Absolutely. I put a lot of swarm traps out. Some years are better than others, but if you give your bees enough room in the spring, you can kind of knock that swarming tendency out of them a little bit. First year queens, queens that I got this year, they're not as apt to swarm next year as an older queen. And of course, different genetics, some bees are just kind of swarming.
When you do a walkway split, when you move the old queen over, and let's say the queen's hatch and the new queen flies out, is eaten by a bird, do you put eggs in there for them to strike in, or do you move the old queen back?
I didn't hear the tail of that.
So you do a walkway split. Right?
Yeah.
So the queen cells, they hatch, the queen flies,
Yeah.
it's eaten by a bird.
Yeah.
So there's no queen in that hive now. Do you move the old queen back, or do you put eggs in there for them to make?
Nope, they've already started cells.
I know, after the cells hatch, and the
Yeah.
queen flies out. This
Yeah.
happens to me a lot.
Yeah.
The bird eats it. Now you don't have a queen in the hive.
Yeah,
Do you move the old queen back, or
Nope.
do you put eggs in there for them to make new?
she's now a new.
So does nuke have the queen cells?
Yeah.
When the queen
The
cells
nuke
hatch?
doesn't have a queen cell. If I'm robbing a queen from a production colony to start a nuke, I'm leaving the production colony with mature swarm cells.
Right, so when that swarm cell hatches, the queen flies out,
Yeah.
and she gets eaten by a bird.
Oh, okay.
Now you don't have a queen. Do you move the old queen back in, or do you put eggs in there for them to try?
It would depend, I guess, upon what the situation is. Yeah. No, that's a good point. Queens get lost, queens get eaten. When they're so close, they fly into the wrong hive. That doesn't work out very well. So, again, the nukes make honey, which is a wonderful resource. And next year, I really am going to try to have a particular nuke yard that I could kind of set up like this. And I use queen excluders, because I don't want the queens up there above this laying eggs in there, because they'll have that tendency, they'll go up there and she'll always start to lay in this little area there, and I don't want that. I guess I'm doing pretty good on time, you know.
So
Here's a yeah.
in overwintering, what percentage of hives do you lose?
I think I overwintered 60 last year, and I lost 2.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Feeding for those small nukes, you start to think about room and honey. How much honey do you leave for them, or do you do any supplemental feeding?
Real good question. There, you know, here's my 10-frame box. Remember, this is a 10-frame box split, so I've got 4 deeps and 4 deeps. So they're going to have 20, 22, 23 pounds of honey up here. Because once the cycle starts and things change a little bit, the queen's going to slow down. They're going to force her down there anyway. They're going to start backfilling this brood nest. It's a condensed brood nest, but the bees do very, very well in a condensed environment like this. And also one of the factors, I guess, of keeping bees like this is they're sharing warmth from the sidewalls of the hive. And from time to time, you're going to have to feed your bees, so I like these frame feeders. So now I have 3 frames, and I've got a gallon feeder in there. So this colony is a little suspect. In September and October, they're not doing very well on the chamisa for whatever reason. Give them a gallon of honey. Where's my inner cover? Keep everything inside the colony, and then I'm going to reduce this entrance so there's not going to be a whole lot of robbing going on. And of course, bees will smell syrup from a mile away, so I don't like feeding on the outside of the colony. And I don't like feeding using jars on the inner covers and putting another box on top, because there's always some little crack where you're going to get bees in there, and they will decimate and nuke. Those production colonies start robbing in the fall, or in the spring for that matter. So I like using the frame feeders like that. I leave them in some of the nukes all winter. So in the spring, I've got a lot of bees up here. This is mostly empty. The bees have moved up on these 3 frames, and I can feed immediately. Once they start to take off, I just pull the feeder, add a frame of foundation, especially in the spring, and let them go. How are we going on time, Brent?
2 minutes. I think you can continue
Okay.
this in your next talk.
Need to talk about being too late. I also run a lot of 5-frame nucleus colonies. And when I pop a top like this, I say to myself, you're not doing your job, John, because those bees were on such a nectar flow, they had no place to put it. So what do? They start, I'm sure some of you see this in your bee yards. They start packing everything. They draw out burr comb in every available inch, and you got a mess on your hands. So I'm too late there. I missed probably 4 frames of deep honey. I would have given them foundation or some comb at the right time. It happens. And lo and behold, people say, how did you start getting into beekeeping? I think I was 32 years old when this was taken in Virginia. And I think, honestly, that was the first swarm I ever saw, or helping out my friend in Virginia. And before long, I was helping him in the bee yards. And then the next summer, he said, well, you know, you don't have much to do up there in New Hampshire. Why don't you come down and help me with the bees? And I did. And I did the next year. And we ended up partnering. And we ran about 2,500 colonies, production colonies, in the Shenandoah Valley. And as Frank mentioned, sourwood production in Apiaries, Virginia. And that's a whole other presentation of managing bees for sourwood. Do I have time for 1 or 2 questions? Sure. 1 or 2 questions. Yes?
Yeah, you talked, operational question, you talked about when you go to add your second, how you move the outside frame up, and already brought up Michael Palmer, so I'm going to email him. He said to bring up the inside frame. Why do you choose the outside frame?
You can use an inside frame too. I know that these bees are so strong and that I have so much brood here, it's not going to matter, but I like to bait them. So you can bait them if you have comb. Sure, put that up there. They're going to go immediately to that. That's actually wet comb. But I have on occasion take a frame of partial brood and put it in the middle, and bees are going to obviously gravitate to open brood or seal brood, and it just kind of baits them up into the second box. But generally I have no problem at all just adding 4 more frames of foundation. They're eager to go up there. They need the room. Remember, bees will never touch foundation and draw it out unless they need to draw it out. They need the excess room. 1 more. Yes?
Could one feasibly just do nukes, let's say a backyard beekeeper with very little space and raise bees?
Wonderful way to keep and manage bees in a kind of a small scale environment. As I mentioned, not everyone does bees for honey production. We have queen breeders here that raise their own bees and queens. You can introduce queens, mated queens into your splits, your nukes. Really nice, because this hive here, see the queen excluder right back there? I took sealed brood from the bottom and moved it up, and the queen is down below now. And then to make up my splits, I just pulled the top off and I've got 3 or 4 frames of brood right there. And I put them in there immediately. I don't have to worry about finding the queen. Okay? Thank you all very much.
Great presentation, John. Thank you very much. So our next presentation, John will be joined, so just hang around up here, John. We'll be joined by Dr. Jose Dia. And Jose has conducted research on Africanized bees and breeding bees for resistance to tracheal and varroa mites. Formerly with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, breeding genetics and physiology, I should say, research laboratory in Baton Rouge, is now retired and operates Cottonwood Creek Apiaries in Presto, Colorado. It is published extensively in USDA's Egg Research Magazine, Oxford Academic, PubMed, and many other scientific journals. So we have a very distinguished scientist with us this afternoon, and so let's give a hand for John.